Hello friends, I am Arpit and I'm here with today's analysis. Today's 18th of June and we're going to deal with three very important topics which are in news. First is the Council of Ministers. The new government has been formed. The Council of Ministers have taken oath. In total, including the Prime Minister, there are 72 Council of Ministers which are headed by the Prime Minister. This is well within the constitutional limit of 15% of the total strength of Lok Sabha. This 15% strength limit was introduced by the 91st Amendment Act. Earlier, there was no such limit. Next is ICET meeting. ICET stands for Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. This initiative is between the governments of India and the government of USA. The USA National Security Advisor is here for this meeting, and he'll be meeting his Indian counterpart, Mr. Ajit Doval. This initiative started in the year 2023 formally, but it was announced in 2022 by both the governments. Critical and emerging technologies like space, defense tech, semiconductor chip manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing, all these are discussed over here. Next is prevention on sexual harassment at workplace. It is called as the POSH Act. The cases filed or reported under the POSH Act are on the rise. They were briefly dipped during the COVID lockdowns. Well, this simply means that the reporting is going up. Earlier also there were cases of sexual harassment at workplace, but these cases were unreported or underreported. Now, since we are seeing a rise in the cases filed under the POSH Act, it simply means that the reporting has increased. Well, this is good news, but if women are leaving their jobs because of sexual harassment at workplace, that is a bad news and that is happening. So let's get started and let's deal with the topics. First is the Council of Ministers. So the Union Council of Ministers was sworn in on 9th of June 2024. And this, Council of Ministers is headed by the Prime Minister. 30 cabinet ministers are there. 5 ministers of state with independent charge. Means there is no minister ranked person over there above them. They are the highest bearers of those ministries, of those offices. And 36 minister of states which will work under the ministers in charge for that particular ministry. Now the constitutional provisions for the Council of Ministers. So in the constitution it is simply written in Article 74 that there shall be a Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister to aid and advise the President, and President largely cannot do anything without the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So it has been mentioned over there. Then the real executive powers lie with the Council of Ministers. President is a nominal head, whereas Council of Ministers are having the real executive power. And since Council of Ministers is headed by the Prime Minister, so Prime Minister is the real head of the country. So this is how it is to be interpreted. The hierarchy. Hierarchy means Prime Minister is heading the Council of Ministers. Then we have ministers. Then we have ministers of state. Then we have deputy ministers. But is this hierarchy mentioned in the Constitution? Well, let us look at this particular question will be answered over here, because UPSC can ask minutest of these kind of details, that this rank and hierarchy is also mentioned in the Constitution. But yes, let us look at the details and we'll come to the answer of this question. The Council of Ministers consists of a cabinet minister, minister of state with independent charge, minister of state, and a deputy minister. Now, does the Constitution classify the ranks? It does not classify the members of the COM into different rank. It does not. The Constitution doesn't. All this has been done informal, following the British practice. Constitution only talks about Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So PM is here, then cabinet minister, minister of state with independent charge, minister of state, where a cabinet minister is there in a ministry, and deputy minister. These are generally the posts there in the Council of Minister. The ranking that Prime Minister is at the top is mentioned at places in the constitution, if we interpret it, that the Council of Ministers has to be headed by the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister is at the top. But yes, below the Prime Minister, Cabinet Minister, Minister of State with independent charge, Minister of State, or Deputy Minister, this rank and hierarchy is not mentioned in the constitution. We have to be very clear about it. Cabinet ministers are higher in rank and handle large portfolios, while Minister of States assist the cabinet ministers and work under them. Minister of State with independent charge directly reports to the Prime Minister for their respective ministries. Now, this is according to the informal practice followed during the British period. Now, the COMs of the past, the Council of Ministers of the past. So, whenever when we started our independent journey in 1947, there was an interim government established, and then in that interim government, 15 ministers were there, and that was headed by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. After the first general elections were conducted in 1952, 30 ministers in this Council of Ministers were there. Then the United Front government led by Deve Gowda, we fast forward to the 1990s, and IK Gujral in 1997. Deve Gowda was in June 1996, IK Gujral in 1997. They were sworn in with 21, means HD Deve Gowda had 21 ministers and IK Gujral government had 34 ministers. In 1999, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee government was formed from 1999 till 2004, the COM had 74 ministers at that time. Now see the numbers increasing from 30s to 70s. UPA 1, 2004 to 2009, it had 79 ministers. The number was the same in UPA 2. May 2014 means when the BJP came to power by defeating the Congress. Prime Minister Modi had 46 ministers in the COM, and in 2019, for the second time when he came to power, there were 57 ministers. So we can see the numbers have dropped from 79 to 46 and 57. Well, in this particular tenure from 2019 till 2024, there was a time when there was cabinet reshuffle or COM reshuffle in 2021, and at that time there were 78 members in the COM. Now in 2024, 72 members COM is there. It was being speculated that the COM will be large because it has to accommodate the alliance partners and all. But as of now, it is less than the previous time. The constitutional limit. The National Commission to Review the Constitution under the chairmanship of Justice Venkat Chalaya, which was formed in the year 2000, recommended a ceiling of 10%. So recommendations are recommendations, they are not binding. What actually turned out to be under the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act in 2003, that 15% of the total strength of Lok Sabha or State Legislative Assembly, because there is a Council of Ministers which is headed by the Chief Minister in the states also. But largely our focus presently in this is on Lok Sabha. So 15% of the strength of Lok Sabha, that should be the maximum strength of the Council of Ministers, and that it turns out to be effectively 81, 82. So 72 ministers, well within that 15% limit. The lower limit is also set? No, no minimum requirement at the central level is there. Whereas even the smaller states should have a minimum of 12 ministers. So for smaller states, 12 ministers are there. For union territories of NCT of Delhi and Jammu and Kashmir, the maximum limit is 10% of the total strength of its assembly. So Delhi has the total strength of assembly as 70. So 7 ministers can be formed in Delhi. This is the maximum limit. Minimum limit for some states, 12 ministers should be there. Now, has this limit been breached anyhow? Yes, certain states, apart from the Council of Ministers, like the Chief Minister, the Cabinet Ministers in the state, then the Minister of States, Minister of State in the states with independent charge, Minister of State under a Cabinet Minister of the state, and Deputy Minister. Apart from these ranks, also some states have formed Parliamentary Secretaries Post (PS). They are equivalent to the ministers, COMs, just to accommodate their demand. These kind of posts are created. Well, in the center also these kind of posts were created, but it was until 1990 only. After 1990, we have not seen such kind of posts being, formed in the center. There has been a practice of appointing parliamentary secretaries. The PS office is not mentioned in the constitution and is a British practice. Again, it is not mentioned in the constitution. When was the post created in India? It was created for the first time in 1951. They have not been a regular feature of the central governments thereafter, and the last PS at the center was appointed in 1990. However, various states have continued with their appointment to circumvent the limit on COM placed by the 91st Amendment Act. So they want to breach the limit, that is 15% wala limit, which has been placed by the 91st Amendment Act. So they are not appointing ministers or minister of states or cabinet ministers or deputy ministers. They are appointing parliamentary secretaries, which are equivalent to ministers in a sense, just to satisfy the demands of their party members. And by doing so, they are breaching that 15% limit. And the high courts, they have been very harsh on the political parties in the states. Very recently, the Himachal High Court has, summoned the government over there that this is not going to happen. You're not going to create parliamentary secretaries post. They had created. Next is ICET meeting. ICET stands for Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, and you can see from the picture, Mr. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor of United States of America, and Mr. Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor of India. They met, and one I would say basic outcome of this meeting was they resolved to prevent the leakage of sensitive and dual use technologies to countries of concern. Dual use technologies simply means a product which can be used for military purpose, it can be used for civilian purpose as well. So dual use is there. For example, nuclear fuel, uranium, can be used for generating electricity and treating cancers. Civilian use can be used for making a bomb also. So this is what dual use goods mean. About ICET, this initiative is basically a joint framework or a collaborative framework between the countries, that is United States and India only. And it was announced in May 2022, but yes, in January 2023, the inaugural ICET meeting took place. And this meeting took place in Washington, D.C., where our national security advisor traveled over there. The present meeting, which is ongoing in New Delhi, is the second meeting under ICET. NSAs are again meeting. However, after this meeting or on the sidelines of this meeting, the US NSA also went on to meet the Indian Prime Minister. So, this is what was there. Now, areas of cooperation under ICET, this is important. Artificial intelligence, exploration and trade of critical minerals, defense industrial cooperation, defense technology cooperation, and defense startups. Since we have, strategic relationship with USA. USA is the second largest supplier of arms to India. Resilient semiconductor supply chains. Semiconductor is basically a critical element nowadays in this digital era, and China had been, blackmailing us kind of on the supply of semiconductors. Space exploration. So we have a manned mission lined up, that is the Gaganyaan mission lined up to be launched in 2024, and NASA is helping us in this. And apart from this manned mission, there are other collaborations also in the space sector. Then science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM sector, which is quite booming, and this is going to be in scope for the upcoming at least 50 years from now. And next gen telecommunications, 5G, 6G, and all. So, in all these sectors are being discussed. But the remarkable thing here, I again want to repeat, is that the NSAs, the National Security Advisors, are meeting under this initiative. Next is prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. Now, more and more women are getting into the STEM sector. Just now we read science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So more and more women are getting employed in the STEM sector in India. A good news. Women employability is on the rise. A good news. Women participation in the workforce is on the rise. A good news. Nari Shakti, after all, is actually showcasing its Shakti. But amidst all this, the attrition rate is defined as the percentage of employees who leave an organization, is also in general on the rise for females. Where there are multiple reasons for this high attrition rate among the females. First is societal pressure after marriage. Second is pregnancy and post pregnancy work life balance. These reasons, obviously, males do not encounter. Sexual harassment at workplace is also a reason which can be added in this list. The reporting of cases under the POSH Act have gone up, and in the recent years, after a brief dip during the COVID years, because lockdown was there, everyone was working from home, so there was no point of sexual harassment at workplace. But according to the law, sexual harassment could have happened at that time also. Why I'm saying this, we'll see when we talk about this law. So the genesis of this law can be traced back to the 1997 Vishakha guidelines released by the Supreme Court. These guidelines noted by the Supreme Court was there in absence of any law that guarantee against sexual harassment at workplaces. The apex court laid down a set of guidelines to fill the statutory vacuum. Means there was no law, so there was a statutory vacuum till a law could have been enacted. So from 1997 onwards, these were the guidelines which were acting like a law because there was no law passed by the parliament. And Supreme Court said that until a law is made by the parliament, these guidelines will be acting like a statute. Now, the POSH bill, it was introduced by the Women and Child Development Ministry in 2007. But one disturbing fact over here is that it got passed in 2013. It took 6 long years for this bill to get passed in the Parliament of India. I don't know why. Because at that time also participation of women in the workforce was on the rise. At that time also, there were more and more women graduating, wanting to work, and there were cases of sexual harassment. Now, the key provisions of this bill. First is it defines sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is any unwelcome act such as physical, verbal, non-verbal conduct, a demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, etc. Now, verbal conduct, sexually colored remarks could have been passed in cases of lockdown also, in cases of working from home also. That is why I said that, this was the provisions of the act were such that in case of lockdowns also this were applicable. Then defines an employee. It employs not just in accordance with the company law. All women employees, whether employed regularly, temporarily, or contractually on ad hoc or daily wage basis as apprentices or interns, can seek protection under this sexual harassment, this Prevention of Sexual Harassment. It expands the definition of workplace also. Now, since this definition of workplace has also been expanded, so definitely it was applicable during the lockdown days also. Beyond traditional offices to include all kinds of organizations across sectors, even non-traditional workplaces. For example, telecommuting or working from home now, and places visited by the employees for. So all these are places of work where sexual harassment, if it is happening, it will be, investigated and trialed under or as per the provisions of the Prevention of Sexual Harassment. Now, according to this law, the employer has to formulate an internal complaints committee in the organization. But there is a catch over here. Those companies or those organizations where there are more than 10 employees, simply meaning that they are part of organized sector. They have to form an ICC, that is Internal Complaints Committee. Who will be the member of Internal Complaints Committee? First of all, there will be 4 members, at least half of whom should be women. So this has to be understood. The presiding officer means the who will be heading this particular internal complaints committee should be a woman employee. 2 members from amongst the employees and who have had experience in social work or have legal knowledge, and one external member should also be there in the committee so that he can or she can take unbiased decisions. But what about those people who are working in the unorganized sector? And in India, 91% of our workforce, 91% is working in unorganized sector. Like, for example, the house helps which come to our homes, or, any showroom where, any cosmetics showroom or any sari showroom where women employees are there, or any jewelry showroom where women employees are there. Most of them are not counted under the organized sector. Organized sector is that sector where there are more than 10 employees and all the laws of the land are being followed. All the laws of the land mean labor laws, establishment laws, and all. So most of our workforce, 91% of our workforce is working in the unorganized sector. For them, what is the provision? Does this law protect them as well? Well, it does by the formation of local committees. So every district in the country to create a local committee. Where will this local committee be? It will be from in the district headquarters, headed by the district magistrate of that district. So women working in firms with less than 10 employees, or largely it is in an informal firm, and from the informal sector, including domestic workers, they can file complaints in this local committee, which is headed by a district magistrate and is sitting in the district headquarters. So once you become the DM, you will be heading this committee as well. The role of ICC and LC, they have to conduct inquiries. Main role is this, in line with the POSH Act and comply with the principles of natural justice. A woman can file a written complaint either on the internal or local complaints committee within 3 to 6 months of sexual harassment incident. So within 3 to 6 months, you can file. There are two ways to resolve the issue by committee. Thorough conciliation between the complainant and the respondent, which cannot be a financial settlement. Consider this. This is out of court settlement kind of, but it should not be a financial settlement. Committees could initiate an inquiry taking appropriate action based on what it finds. So it has the power to take actions also based on the findings of the committee. Now we come to the MCQs. Consider the following statements and mark the correct one. The Union Council of Ministers, which sworn in 2024, is the highest ever in strength. The Constitution defines the rank and hierarchy of Council of Ministers. So the first statement is not correct because 2024 the strength is 72. Council of Ministers formed during the UPA government were 78, 79. Even in 2021 the strength reached to 78 in the Modi cabinet and it was gradually reduced to 72. Now also 72 is there. So this statement is wrong. The Constitution defines the rank and hierarchy of the Council of Ministers. This I explicitly mentioned, does not mention. Constitution has imposed restrictions on the strength of Council of Ministers under which Constitutional Amendment Act. I am not going to discuss this. This is very direct and simple. You can answer this question and very direct it is. Which of these areas of cooperation under initiative on critical and emerging technologies? First is overall supply chain resilience, which is wrong. It is only talking about semiconductor supply chain resilience. So this is wrong. So this is how you can get stuck over here. Defense technology, yes, it is talking about space. Yes, it is talking about shale gas. It is not talking about shale gas. So 2 and 3. So A is going to be the correct answer. Consider the following statements and mark the correct one. The first statement is prevention of sexual harassment is for giving protection to women against sexual harassment in organized sector only. Wrong. What is the local committee formed for? Unorganized sector. It is mandatory for organizations in the formal sector to constitute an internal complaint committee headed by a woman. This is actually true because that committee has to be headed by a woman and has to have minimum 4 members and it has to have 4 members and minimum of those members, half of those members should be women and the head should be women. So this one is correct. This one is wrong. So only 2 is the correct answer of this question. And the last question, which of the following with respect to cases under POSH Act is true? The reported cases under the Act has been on the rise since 2016. No, they dipped during the COVID era and then after that they are on the rise. The POSH Act is applicable in the entire government and private sector. Yes, it is applicable in the entire government and entire private sector, organized or unorganized. POSH Act was enacted in 2010. No, it was enacted in 2013. As I said, that it took 6 long years. Introduced or tabled in the parliament in 2007, got passed in 2013. So that was the case, or none of the above. So this particular statement is correct because it is applicable in the entire government and private sector, organized or unorganized. Now, with this, we come to an end of today's session. I will be seeing you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. I hope you are enjoying the explanation of these questions also. Now, so namaste, Jai.